Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocket Top Insider Press Pass podcast, Wednesday, December 4th edition, Night Pod. Probably hearing this on a Thursday. But I got my guys Rick Butler and Ryan Schumpert along with me. Rick and Ryan haven't been doing much today. It's been a slow day at the office, some are saying. Ryan, do I have that right?
You do have that right. Nothing big going on. No recruiting stuff. No Tennessee football playoff rankings. No Tennessee basketball fresh off a win in the SEC ACC challenge. Really nothing of note in the Tennessee sports world going on this week, or particularly this Wednesday.
Yeah, not often you get a slow day like this in early December, Rick.
He's right for himself. Now, me, on the other hand, I went to a press conference today. So I hopped in my truck. I put some nice clothes on. I went to the Josh Heupel press conference today. So while you guys might have been sitting back in this, at the start of the holiday season, not I. I was proactive. I went to the press conference today. So, don't call me a hero.
Well, at least
you don't have to worry.
No, there is a ton going on right now. It's November is always our crossover month. It's always the big one between basketball and football, and there's even a little bit of baseball going on at times. But now you get to the end of November, and it's not just a potential bowl game on January 30th, right? That it certainly is for some teams, but not for Tennessee anymore. So this has significantly extended crossover season. It is busy. There's a lot going on, but it's a lot of fun right now as well. So glad to be here with you guys.
Also, an earlier signing date. I feel like it's usually like by Christmas.
No, you're right.
Wednesday near Christmas, and
I thought
very early this year.
Normally it's about the 20th or so.
Yeah, I heard it was today, like 2 days ago, and I was like, oh, crap, that's early.
Yeah.
But, Ryan, I'll kick it over to you. Just a quick note on signing day. Anything stood out to you today? Any takeaways you have from, a busy day for Tennessee recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, now there was a lot going on, but nothing too surprising, at least the way the tea leaves were kind of reading in the moments leading up to signing day. So, the big thing to continue to watch, and who knows, by the time you're listening to us on Thursday, it might be resolved. But as of the time we're recording on Wednesday night, 2 Tennessee commits that have not signed. David Sanders, obviously the big one, the top recruit in Tennessee's class, top 5 recruit nationally, and obviously there was some drama with him visiting Ohio State a few weeks ago. He has not signed to this point. We'll see what happens there. And then Onis Konanbanny, who announced today that he doesn't plan to sign until, or at least doesn't plan to sign today. And there's also been some reports he doesn't plan to sign until February. That one less surprising. At least the buzz coming into today is that it felt like he was going to flip to Florida and potentially sign today. So we'll see what happens. Maybe him pushing back to February could end up being a good thing for Tennessee, give Tennessee a chance to swing there again. But a lot going on today. A couple flips away from Tennessee, a couple flips to Tennessee. Tennessee picks up Isaiah Campbell, high 4-star defensive lineman from North Carolina. All of that relatively expected, not a massive surprise. But David Sanders' watch continues as we move into day 2 of the early signing period.
Yeah, Ryan's right. And there's a ton of this over on RocketTopInsider.com. We've been hard at work getting you all these articles, but a couple more headlines to sort of add to the bunch. Not necessarily what Ryan's talking about with guys to look forward to, but just a couple of fascinating headlines on the day that you guys, or certainly the audience, might find interesting. Number one, Tennessee starts the morning off by holding back Georgia from flipping one of their 4-star linebackers. That would be Christian Gass. Tennessee obviously locks down the Volunteer State's top-ranked player with George McIntyre. And then a couple of other big ones throughout the day that I thought were fascinating. Ryan, you just mentioned Onis Konanbanny a second ago. Laganza Hayward, the 4-star safety that decommitted from Tennessee on Sunday, he ends up going to Florida. I kind of thought that might have been Georgia a couple days ago, or certainly from that interview just about a couple weeks ago with that Georgia reporter. He ends up going to Florida here on signing day. He does one of those, he drops the picture frames. I don't know if you guys saw it. Timothy Merritt, I believe it's actually Tim Merritt, based on the way that Josh Heupel talked about it today at his press conference. He had a not safe for work sort of press conference, or not press conference, but sort of announcement reveal. I'm sure you can go and find that online, although it's not on our site. I don't think it will be. And then just a couple hours ago, one of the really interesting bullet points for the night is that Nico Iamaleava's brother Madden Iamaliava from Long Beach, California, originally a UCLA commit from all the way back in May. At the last minute, he flips over to Arkansas. Now, what's interesting about that? Arkansas will travel to Knoxville to take on Tennessee next year. I don't think that Iamaliava is going to be in that in a position to be the starter, obviously, in his first year at Arkansas. But boy, that's going to be a bit of a wild and not really an expected outcome or just projection for next year's football season. So there's something to think about as well. But a lot of fascinating headlines from the day. Those are just some of them. But I at least did not see myself that Madden Iamaliava would come into play here towards the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I didn't either. And I saw an Arkansas media tweet. One of the writers was like, I'm glad I spent all that time, learning how to pronounce the Iamaliava in October. And I was like really confused by it. I was like, what is he talking about? And then I literally Googled Nico Iamaliava to see if something was going on with him, and then saw it, the Madden news. So that was interesting. And the other one you mentioned, Merritt in his, his kind of some entertainment at his flip. A lot of entertainment today at Parker High School down in, I believe, the Birmingham area, who's playing for the state championship against Saraland this weekend. Naheem Offord, the number one player in the state of Alabama, a 5-star cornerback, flipped his commitment from Ohio State to Oregon today at the same ceremony. So 2 flips in the defensive backfield at Parker today. And, maybe an explicitive and Merritt's commitment to Tennessee, and then one of the top player in the state of Alabama and a 5-star recruit flipping from one Big Ten school to another.
That is wild. It does feel like it's been and I don't know, I've obviously not boots on the ground for other programs, any other program around the country, but it does feel like there's maybe a lot of unexpected surprises today, or maybe at least just there's a lot of movement. I don't really know what's going on, but to kind of go along the lines of that, Arkansas pulled off a major heist. Not only did they get 4-star Iamaliava, but they also flipped, I believe it's wide receiver 3-star Jace Brown, who is also a UCLA commit, who's now going to the Razorbacks program as well. So Arkansas pulled quite the heist by going into LA and getting a wide receiver and a quarterback of their future. You just mentioned the crazy stuff going down in Birmingham, Alabama today. So there's certainly been some fireworks around the college football landscape, or I guess the high school landscape for, in reality, but a lot of ripple waves and effects from it.
Yeah, no question. And, non-signing day news, but departure for Tennessee into the portal today. And running back Khalifa Keith, it's one of those departures that shouldn't come, not be a surprise or anything. Guys want to go elsewhere, get playing time, and be relied upon, as it obviously seems he's going to be down the depth chart next year anyway, behind Selden and Peyton Lewis. So Khalifa Keith enters the portal today.
Yeah, and Bison Lang entered yesterday too. So, and really, I shouldn't say entered, announced plans to enter, because the portal doesn't open until next week, which is probably why I'm guessing they do early signing date this week, is so you can kind of get this over with before portal just gets crazy next week. So, like Jack said, neither of those were any sort of big surprise. I'll be curious to see if Tennessee hangs on to their 3 other main running backs. With Peyton Lewis and Bishop and Selden, all 3 of those guys, it feels like there'll be a real opportunity there. And, I could easily see it being a 3-man rotation next season, but that'll be curious to see if Tennessee has any more roster movement at the running back spot later this month.
All right, let's get to playoff talk. Another edition of the College Football Playoff Rankings was released on Tuesday night. Not a big surprise as far as Tennessee is concerned. I know that us 3 talked about it leading up to Tuesday night, that we all expected Tennessee to be the 9th seed in the bracket. That is what Tennessee is, 7th overall team. So as it sits right now, Tennessee would head to Columbus to play Ohio State in the first round. Winner goes and plays Oregon, likely in the Rose Bowl, of course. And there's no disputing that this is a very tough draw for Tennessee, especially when you look at how other teams are set up. I mean, if you look at the 5 seed, it's just absurd how ridiculously easy the 5 seeds draw will be in this format, playing either Big 12 or G5 school first, and then playing the other side of that coin in the second round and in your sixth bowl. So it's not fair the way the bracket is set up. I think it needs to be reseeded every round. But as it stands right now, Tennessee on the outside looking in as far as host spots go and would travel to Ohio State in the first round. Definitely a tough position for the Vols, but hey, you're in. So
for sure. And I think, I don't think they got the rankings wrong. I didn't really have any issue with the rankings on Tuesday night that came out. I don't think there's a major gap between Ohio State and Tennessee's resume, but I do think Ohio State definitely does have a better resume. So I thought Ohio State should have been ahead of Tennessee. And then kind of on the opposite end, that the battle for essentially the last spot with the 3 SEC teams and Miami in there, Alabama gets it. And, look, I think you're splitting hairs a lot with those teams. But, yeah, I mean, Alabama probably does have the best resume. So I wasn't shocked by any of those things, and I don't think they necessarily got them wrong. I do get why Tennessee fans, it's got to be sickening to Tennessee fans. You're 10-2, you're better than Alabama, who's 9-3. Alabama's not only going to get in, but the way things currently stand, or at least it looks like they're going to get in, the way things currently stand, they have a significantly easier path than you, despite being seated two spots lower. And I think that's where, the beef for me, or my criticism would be not with how the committee ranked things this week, but with the format and the rules and the automatic tie-ins that got us to this point where, being the 9 seed is /8 seed, but really 9 seeds since you're on the road is kind of already where you don't want to be because of the potentially, you'd have to play the 1 seed in the second game, and then it gets particularly bad for Tennessee when they get some bad luck. And it feels like against potentially facing Ohio State, you're facing a team that's better than the teams that are going to be ranked 5 through 7 or seeded 5 through 7, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a brutal draw. Yeah.
The way that I see it is unless you are a college football fan living in either Ann Arbor, Michigan, or maybe Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I think you look at this bracket and you see that Tennessee and Ohio State together. And if you're somebody who wants to get the best games into this playoff, which is the point of why it all expanded to 12 teams anyways, to get the best teams and to get the best games possible. I think you're looking at Tennessee and Ohio State saying, wait, like that sucks as a first round matchup, right? Because both of those teams are teams that could potentially make some noise later in the college football playoffs, especially if you're seeing teams like potentially an SMU or Boise State or Clemson or UNLV potentially getting a bye in the first round. And no knock to the conference champions. I do think that BYU is different, or not BYU, but SMU is different from those in the bunch. But you're right. I agree with you guys. And I think that when you look at Tennessee and Ohio State, yes, you can go out there and I think you can cherry pick an argument for Tennessee. I think you can cherry pick specific arguments for Ohio State, but I agree with you guys. And I think that when you look at sort of the most basic metrics without having to dive too far out into the realm of wild things to look at from the season, Ohio State does kind of inch out Tennessee, even with that loss last week to Michigan. Maybe you're one of those people who are really kind of clamoring for how you close the season versus how you end it. But I think other teams a little bit further back in the playoff rankings are having those conversations as well. And I'm sure we'll get into the final spots here a little bit more. But that's at least the way that I see Tennessee. I agree with you guys. I think that, sure, if there's Tennessee fans frustrated, I get that. All right. I get why they would be frustrated. But I also get why Tennessee is at that 9 position. And it doesn't feel like Tennessee is necessarily the talk of the town of teams who should be angry coming out of this week. So at the end of the day, Tennessee is squarely in the playoffs. They're not going to leave the playoffs. And, fortunately for Tennessee fans, you're not one of these bubble teams fighting at the end because I guess I haven't really thought about that much, but I don't know where Tennessee would land. At least they're safely in the playoffs. So that's where we stand with just, about 4 or 5 days, I guess, until the final rankings. So a lot going on there.
Yeah, and it's important to note Tennessee's spot can't get worse this weekend because you look at the teams behind Tennessee. Of course, stuff could change with 12, but I think if like SMU loses to Clemson, Tennessee will be ahead of SMU. So that's the only team that, I think, could bump Tennessee down that's already ahead of them and then cause another team to leap because obviously Clemson could get a bye in that scenario, what have you, or, Big 12 would take its place. But Tennessee spot, almost 100% not going to get worse. It can only improve. Will it improve is the question. So I personally think there's slim chances for Tennessee to ultimately host a playoff game. The best path, I struggle with what I think is the best path here, because one team Tennessee lost to, the other they haven't played, but it's Georgia or Penn State getting dominated in a conference championship game. Penn State would have to fall further than Georgia, as Penn State's the 5 seed right now, Georgia the 7. But of course, Georgia would have one more loss than Tennessee. Would the committee penalize one of those teams that much to cause Tennessee to move up a spot? I don't know. I wouldn't bank on it. I honestly think if Georgia loses, they stay where they're at. Penn State could fall 1 spot, Notre Dame up to 5. I think that's honestly likely. But as it sits right now and how the matchups are set up, where there's no rematches, there's interconference matchups here, which is what the committee wants. You don't want a Tennessee Georgia rematch or an Ohio State Indiana rematch. So the way it's set up right now, I really don't see Tennessee improving, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, I don't see Tennessee jumping to like the 8 seed, for instance.
Yeah, that's what I'm laying out here. Yeah.
I don't see that happening. I really can see Penn State falling all the way to the 8 seed and Tennessee playing Penn State instead of Ohio State. Like, to me, yes, Penn State would have one more win with the same number of losses, but Ohio State beat them head to head. They have a significantly better resume. I mean, you talk about Ohio State's resume being better than Tennessee's. Well, from a strength of schedule, number of teams they've played, quality wins, like that aspect, Ohio State has by far the best resume in the Big Ten. They've played more of the quality teams in the Big Ten than anybody else. And by a long shot, Penn State played what? Ohio State and Illinois. Illinois was their next biggest game, I believe.
Yep.
So yeah, if it's like a real tight game, which look, the line's like 3.5 points or 4 points, so Vegas certainly doesn't expect it to be a lopsided game. Probably Penn State doesn't, but like, I don't know, if it's 14 points, if it's 31-17, like, I really wouldn't be surprised if Penn State falls all the way below Ohio State. Now, on the reverse side of it, I don't think that'll happen, because while Georgia is ranked lower right now, I just think and I think we talked about this last week, I think the committee is going to want to avoid the conference versus conference matchups in the first round. So I don't think they would drop Georgia behind Ohio State into the 8 seed to send Tennessee to Athens to have a rematch of a game that just happened a month earlier. So
no, if Georgia's dropping, they're dropping to 10. I don't think that happens, right? But yeah, crazier things have happened. Georgia would have 3 losses. I mean, you could find a way to justify that, and then have Georgia go to whoever Big Ten school. I guess it would be Ohio State, right, at 7. So
yeah, I do think that's kind of where like the perception or like the optics more than anything really matters. Like, I can't remember who, and maybe it was in our group chat in the fourth quarter of the Tennessee Georgia game, where it really did not feel like Tennessee had any chance to win that game, but it was like, this could be big if Tennessee could just like make this a 3-point game. And I think the committee would have a lot easier of a time doing that if Tennessee had, forced Georgia to kick a field goal on that final drive and went down and scored a touchdown and lost by 3 points, even though it would be a very misleading 3-point game to just say, well, Georgia won by 3 at home. Like, yeah, they won the head-to-head, but they were at home and it was a really competitive game. So you can justify dropping them. I think you're going to have a lot harder time dropping Georgia below Tennessee, even with the one more loss, given that they won that game by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, Jack, to your point, I think that if you're looking for the available pass, like that's the only ones. Even if the chances are slim, I think those are the ones you're looking at, Georgia and Penn State. And I think that, Ryan, I think you just laid out the argument very nicely that it doesn't feel like Georgia is going to be out of the territory of hosting a game, even if they lose to Texas coming up this weekend. And I don't think that Texas would be either. But that Penn State one is fascinating. Maybe there's something that could happen to where the committee loses a little bit of trust or loses a little bit of faith. But I still think that, I mean, what was it just a couple years ago? Wasn't it TCU? And I'm going to go back on this point here in a second, but wasn't it TCU who lost the Big 12 championship game?
They maybe
still made it.
Yeah.
They still made it into that 14 playoff, right? And
yeah,
again, I know
they didn't change seeds. They stayed at 3 because other teams lost. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I know there's, it's sometimes it's hard to just pick out an example and compare it, especially when you're talking about 14 versus 12 team. But I don't know. I think that there just has been maybe some moments here in the college football playoff history where they just don't penalize the conference championship losers that much because it is such a great loss, if you will, whether that to be to Oregon or Texas. Those are your top two teams in the nation right now. So I think the chances are extremely slim. I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you're looking into the weather forecast for Columbus and
Yeah.
for Happy Valley, right? I think that's probably more of the reality that Tennessee's facing. But those are your two avenues. I can't see really any other way that it would come down to it.
Well, and I know Ohio State lost to Michigan and just looked terrible and put up 10 points, but I mean, let's be honest. I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you'd rather go to Happy Valley and play James Franklin in a big, I mean, Ryan Day hasn't done well in big games either, but you'd rather play the less talented team, I think. So
Tennessee doesn't have enough blue and yellow in their color combo to, I really think put some fear into Ryan Day like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ohio State, they're going to be on 2 weeks or, on rest, and they just got embarrassed by Michigan. Like, they're going to be hungry no matter which way you slice it. Penn State will, have played an extra game, and I don't know. I think you'd much rather go to Penn State, though, is what I'm saying. Just play the less talented team. So Tennessee fans should probably be rooting for a convincing Oregon win to, potentially bring Ryan's idea here to life.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure, without having, really gotten deep into the weeds of it, how big of an advantage that would be playing Penn State as opposed to Ohio State. But it's just exactly what you said, Jack. I think you'd rather play the less talented team. And as flawed as Ohio State, I think Ohio State is, they're definitely more talented than Penn State is. Maybe more talented than any team in the country.
Yep. Do you think Penn State would bring out a whiteout for that game? Do you think they'd add it to the playoff repertoire? I also thought about that for Tennessee. Would they do maybe Checker Neyland for a first-round playoff game? That is something that selfishly I would like to see with my own two eyes. I don't know when I would ever get the chance otherwise.
I've heard there could be rights issues with like Penn State doing only Penn State can only do a whiteout if they're playing on a certain network. I'm not completely sure, but I think there's some TV drama there with when they can do it. I don't know if they can do it if it's an ESPN game, so
that's really strange.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I don't know for a fact. I've just kind of heard that. So it could be something.
Jack, question for you, because I'm not 100% positive of this. I know that the thought would be Tennessee would be in the Rose Bowl against Oregon if they were to win the first game. How is that? Is that chosen like it was in the old system where the one seed gets the first? I know the 4 games are locked in for the quarterfinals, so the one seed gets the first choice, then 2, then 3. Okay.
Yeah, cool. And obviously Oregon's going to.
That wasn't positive.
Big Ten's
and that goes into
anyway, and Oregon's West Coast. So
yeah, no brainer for
that. Goes into Jack's point earlier about Tennessee having, the hardest path through the playoffs as it stands right now. Yes, having to go through a Georgia and a Texas, maybe on the bottom half of the bracket, that's pretty tough. But if you're Tennessee, also having to, first have the fan base go, north to either Pennsylvania or Ohio, and then have to send them all out west, all the way out to California. That's tough. That's not, and I don't know which round this one falls into, but it's not just going over to New Orleans where yes, that is a tough 8 or 9 hour drive, but people can still feasibly do that. The weather conditions probably going to be a little bit easier to make that drive, so on and so forth. So, there's a couple different reasons why Tennessee is facing a tough challenge here with this playoff route that they have. I see Tennessee fans being able to get to that game if they did, because that's the quarterfinals of the playoffs. But I also see it being really a lot more difficult than, any other bowl site to an extent, something along those lines.
Yeah, yes, for sure. I also think there's an element. I think Tennessee's played in the Rose Bowl once or twice, and it was over 100 years ago. And it's such a historic game. Yeah, that I think you would have a lot of people that would not want to miss, making that trip essentially, because it's such a rare opportunity. And not that I think it really matters, because you're going to get the normal allotment of away tickets for the first round game. So this is probably a moot point, but it'll be a lot easier for Tennessee fans to get to Ohio State. I think you'll have more Tennessee fans trying to make that trip closer to Knoxville. Easier to fly into, easier to get lodging, Columbus being a big city as opposed to State College.
And going back to the Rose Bowl, I mean, Nico's a Cali kid. He's going home.
Yeah.
There's that storyline. Oregon was recruiting Nico.
That could be pretty good.
There's a lot there. So
selfishly, I don't know if there's a place that I would rather go to, because it is kind of the historic quality and the nature of it. So selfishly, I don't know if there's one I'd rather go to besides the Rose Bowl. Also, man, this cold front came in just like an angry stampede of elephants this week in Knoxville. I am already ready for a little bit warmer weather. And Jack, you and I don't have a beach in Miami to go hang out at like we did a couple years ago for the Orange Bowl. So, selfishly, if we can get a little bit of warm weather somewhere, I won't complain too much.
In a storyline slot, and this is a negative one, and a big, we'll cross this bridge and talk about it more if Tennessee gets there. Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart guy, came from the Kirby Smart tree. I believe he was still at Georgia, Heupel's first year at Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken.
Lanning's first season at Oregon was 22, so yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one defense that's really had a lot of answers for Josh Heupel, and obviously it's different, but that would be an interesting aspect of it.
And who is the quarterback of Oregon?
Dylan Gabriel. That's right.
Dylan Gabriel, the guy who maybe, I haven't checked the stats, but I still think maybe he had his best seasons under Heupel, and obviously a different conference and things like that. Maybe he's really got it going with Lanning at Oregon, but one of the better quarterbacks that Josh Heupel has had under his wing. So first off, it's wild to think that the quarterback from Josh Heupel's UCF days is still going and could play against him at Tennessee in his fourth year in Knoxville.
And went to a school in between.
Yes, and went to a school that's now in the SEC, but wasn't when he was there.
And that's Josh's alma mater.
And that's Josh Heupel's alma mater. Josh Heupel is maybe the most intertwined man in this playoffs. I think that's what we're that's what we're figuring out here. But yeah, for a lot of different reasons. I mean, and the brand name of, and I understand that we're kind of skipping a step here, and Tennessee's going to have to beat Ohio State for these things to happen. But
we're storyline brainstorming right now.
We're storyline guys. That's why we're wrestling fans here. But the idea, like there is some really cool connections between Tennessee and Oregon. I mean, you go back to that game in Oregon, I mean, what was that, over a decade ago now at this point? So I think there's some teams or some fans that still have those memories. So I think there's a lot of good to take away there.
I have, and we've come to the part of every podcast where I have to push back against something Rick says. And then I'm going to do some work for the Oregon beat when the storyline watch. Oregon beat the dog crap out of Tennessee in both those games. Tennessee, they went at home, and Oregon just beat the brakes off of terrible Tennessee teams. So I don't really know how historic or anything that
Ryan,
is.
Don't you think that that all these Tennessee players have that circled? Like,
no, I say that. I think that there are a lot of people who are older than me with better memories than me who remember those games, who are like, look, I don't, those games have been long out of my memory for a long time. I do think that there's other people like me though, who don't like I don't remember watching those games live. I don't think I did. Right. So the final score is not necessarily the first thing on my mind. It's just like, Tennessee and Oregon did have a home and home while back. Tennessee got plastered in both of them. Like I do remember that. But maybe it's a time to kind of correct those sins, if you will. So I think there's maybe historic was the wrong word, but I do think that there is at least a little bit of something you can call
historic rivalry, Rick. You need to dig.
All right, I'll stand on business. It's a historic rivalry that needs to be brought back to the forefront of college football. You're right. You got me backed into a corner.
The two things I remember, or one thing I remember about each game, I think the game in Knoxville, which was like 2011, maybe 10, there was like a 2-hour rain delay in the first half. Crazy long rain delay. And in the 2013 game, I think Tennessee scored, if not their opening drive, they went up 7-0 before Oregon proceeded to score about the game's next 56 points.
I remember.
And then the other storyline watch, which one won't be any good for us, but the Oregon people out there listening, the beat reporters, I'm helping you out here. Dylan Gabriel, who once committed, and I guess they'll get to do this either way, no matter whether they play Tennessee or not. Dylan Gabriel, who once committed to transfer to UCLA, finally playing in the Rose Bowl at long last. It was going to be his home stadium. He was going to He was going to bring Chip Kelly's program back to relevance. Instead, he's with Chip Kelly's old school in the Rose Bowl. Connect the dots on that one. Full circle.
UCLA is going to have to watch their, the one that got away, as you're talking about right there, and the brother of the guy of the one who got away. They're going to be playing each other. I mean, it's a bad time to be UCLA. It's a bad time to be a Bruin. Let me tell you,
y'all got to write articles about every single storyline here, every single one, no matter how absurd. You got to get it out there so the people can get their hands on it.
All right, dibs on the historic nature of the Tennessee-Oregon rivalry. I got dibs on that one.
My favorite one would be the Madden tie-in, like the one. Yeah. It's the most obscure one that relates to Tennessee. It's like, what the hell? What do I care?
UCLA groundskeepers that are working who are working the Rose Bowl field are just going to be kicking grass, just absolutely ticked off.
Fly out to LA 5 days earlier to do some in-person interviews with the
and
the security
guard.
Got to
get to Long Beach Poly, got to get to Downey High School. We're really going to be hitting the ground running on this thing.
That is the best way to spend your time leading up to the game. I promise you that. We got off the rails a little bit. I think we summed it up though. Tennessee's 9, hard road, probably not going to change. I do want to ask you guys, just non-Tennessee related, but if Clemson beats SMU, who's out, SMU or Alabama?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Oh, I know what it should be.
It should be Alabama out.
Yeah. I think SMU is they've obviously gotten respect throughout the year. I mean, they're sitting here at number 8, just one spot behind Tennessee, but I think they've been a stupid good team. Every single time I've looked at an SMU score this year, they have just been pummeling somebody, just running away with the game. I think they are a very, very, very good team.
They
won't do ratings. The committee won't. I mean, can you imagine an Arizona? No, that wouldn't work. Yeah, no. Arizona State versus SMU, right? Something around those lines could work. I don't know. Some of those games would have no drawing power on television. So I wonder if the committee is afraid of that. But I think SMU should be.
You look at it would be SMU Penn State probably, because like I said, I think Notre Dame will go to 5. Penn State drops 1 spot with a Big Ten championship loss. SMU makes it in over Bama after Clemson wins. It's SMU Penn State. How much more exciting is Bama and Happy Valley than the Ponies in Happy Valley? Don't think they ain't gonna look at it that way.
Oh yeah.
Well, it goes back to Rick said earlier that the reason they expanded the playoff was to get more teams in, which is a accurate statement, but in my mind, my cynical mind, what immediately popped in my mind, no, the reason they did it was to make more money. And
exactly.
To Jack's point, they'll make more money with that. And it's funny. I was talking with my brother yesterday about what, because there's the 4 time slots for the first round games, the Friday night game, and then noon, afternoon, night the next day. And we're talking about what time we thought Tennessee would be, and whether they would view Alabama, Penn State, or Tennessee, Ohio State as a bigger game. And I was like, yeah, probably Penn State, Alabama, if I had to guess. Penn State, SMU might be the Friday night game for just how they would view it in comparison.
I think ESPN has the Friday night game, right? If I'm not mistaken. And
yeah, I think you're right. And TBS has the 2-day games.
You have to look at it as
has the night game.
You have to look at it as what do they want to kick off the playoff? If ESPN, I think ESPN gets to pick. So if they get to pick the Friday night game and the Saturday night game, then Herbie takes which one he wants of the 2. It's like Herbie and Fowler, I should say. But you look at those 2, and then it's like, which one will they want to kick off the playoff? I actually think the Friday night game will be a great one.
Well, if ESPN gets to pick the first 2, then you're right. It'll at least be one of the top 2 games. They won't put the top game on Friday night over Saturday night, just from a general TV standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I think ESPN takes Notre Dame because it's the Notre Dame fan base. You never had a Notre Dame.
They've had so much success though with SEC. You don't think that they'd figure out how to get one of the SEC back on their network? They've had so much success.
I think it changes if Bama's in. If Bama's not in, it'll be different. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee Ohio State's Friday night.
big college football, man. It's a money-driven sport.
No doubting that. Any final thoughts from you guys on the playoff?
I don't have anything.
No.
All right. Well, no matchup to preview this week. Tennessee's not playing. It's Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship down there in Atlanta. A rematch from regular season game in which Georgia dominated in Austin. So that'll be a fun one to watch. I personally think Texas wins. I don't know about you guys, but they looked dang good.
They looked
against A&M.
phenomenal. Yeah,
like
they did.
Without 2 red zone turnovers, they completely beat the brakes off of A&M.
Yeah,
so
I do think, and this is some hindsight bias too, I do think A&M was a little overrated.
That's fair.
Like there were a lot of teams got a lot of stock for beating an LSU team that didn't end up being any good.
Yes.
That's very true.
And A&M
100%.
was near the top of that list.
Yeah. Because the other teams at least had better wins, like
yes, exactly.
except Missouri, or I mean, not Missouri. Oh, I guess South Carolina. Would they have a better win? It's Clemson.
Yeah, but South Carolina lost that game. So
no, they beat A&M.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I thought you were talking about LSU. Yes, correcto.
Oh yeah, I got mixed up.
Real quick, did anybody feel like South Carolina had a case at all? I think you can respect what they've done in the final. I think you can respect what they've done in the final 6 games, but I didn't think they
lost to both teams.
Yeah,
that's the part that kills them. Is to me the Ole Miss loss.
I mean, head-to-head has to matter there.
Yes, because of the Ole Miss game. But if it was just the Alabama game, like I don't necessarily think so. You lost by 3 points or whatever it was on the road. Like
2
points. It didn't head-to-head didn't matter to the committee when Alabama was ranked ahead of Tennessee until they lost their 3rd game. It didn't mean jack to them then. And I'll also say, and this is very flawed logic by me, and I will be the first one to admit that, South Carolina lost the LSU game with its backup quarterback playing for about 3 quarters, and the refs stealing the game from them with some horrific calls.
Yeah. No, they did. Yeah, they should have absolutely won that game.
And I know you shouldn't take that into account when you're deciding who has the case, but to me, the backup quarterback combined with getting hosed, like if they win that game, it's not a debate. So in my mind, I know if you're a decision maker, it's probably harder to have that logic. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I see the case.
I'll say this. South Carolina's been playing the best, down the stretch, obviously, and they didn't do anything to squander their opportunity late in the year like Ole Miss and Bama did. But, I mean, South Carolina's best win, I guess, is Clemson now, and Bama and Ole Miss both beat Georgia, who's in the dance. Like, they have the best win, they have better win, and they beat them on the field. Like, yes, I know the Bama game was weird, but if you go back and remember that game, Bama was like trying to gift wrap it to South Carolina too. They were, falling on their face left and right. It was honestly an ugly game from both sides. But
the reverse of that would be that South Carolina's losses are better than both those teams' losses.
They are. Right. So it's more of what you value there.
Because they're all ranked. If Ole Miss did not have like that, I think if one of their unranked losses was just a ranked loss, I think it'd be a fairly easy conversation to me between those teams right there. Like I think that Ole Miss is so, like, personally, I want to give it to Ole Miss, but you look at those 2 unranked losses, and that is, I mean, Florida and Kentucky. Florida ended up being somewhat good this year, but I think those were just detrimental to them. But I still think that Ole Miss deserves to be ahead of South Carolina. South Carolina can feel thrilled with what they did this season, especially how they closed the season, which I feel like has kind of been an MO of Shane Beamer's time. Like, they close out seasons really nicely. They build momentum into the offseason really nicely. I felt like, hey, it wasn't even really a case of too little too late. It's just that you put yourself real far back behind the 8 ball. And yes, you have really good losses, but 2 of those are to the exact 2 teams you're being compared to.
I mean, and dude, South Carolina fans, like, yeah, they're mad, but come on, you guys were picked to finish 13th in the league, right? Like, no one was even think you were on the fence to make a bowl game by most experts.
They barely almost lost to Old Dominion week 1.
Yeah.
If Old Dominion hadn't fumbled inside their own 10-yard line twice, they would have.
Yeah, it's like not only did you finish the season strong, but you're in the CFP discussion. That's a win, and you've got a great difference-making quarterback that's probably going to be a guy next year. Like, South Carolina is going to be dangerous with Lenore Sellers.
Yeah.
So
And my thing with Ole Miss is like, I don't even really care about, like, I can completely forgive the Florida loss. Florida's playing good right now,
yeah, I
and the
can.
game is on the road. You lost to the 15th best team in a 16-team conference at home. It was their only win against a team with a pulse all season was at your own stadium. Like, that's what's unforgivable to me. Florida game I can forgive. Kentucky loss, completely unforgivable.
No, you're right. And what was their third one? LSU.
LSU,
Late.
yeah.
Which Baton Rouge United.
Overtime.
Yeah. Not a bad loss. I mean, not
Oh,
a
Lane was mad
a
about
great
that.
loss or anything, but
Yeah. We'll see what happens with Alabama. I'll tell you what, if they squeak in again and then get kind of, dominated in the first round, it's going to hurt their brand because that's back to back squeak into the CFPs, get bounced early. Like it's going to change the narrative a bit, I think, just on what Alabama is.
I think the narrative's already changed.
I guess, but there's still I would bet there's still a large contingent of people who are like, oh, you get Alabama and you never know, and then
Yeah.
you get in
There
again
probably
and
is.
you get bounced by a Big Ten school or Notre Dame. Like,
Yeah. I don't know. To me, the loss, it wasn't the Vanderbilt loss was bad. It was the Oklahoma loss was like, all right,
yeah,
Nick
that was
Saban's gone.
embarrassing.
This
That's
isn't the same team.
I agree. Yeah. Back to Rick's point, though, of the trio of SEC teams, I think Bama deserves it the most, but Ole Miss probably has the most dudes and would be the most fun. Like, I think Ole Miss has a higher ceiling than each two. They play at their floor more than the other two, probably. So, this is all the problem with 12-team playoff anyway. We're talking about very flawed teams here on the bubble. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if it was 8 teams,
Teams that don't, frankly, teams that do not deserve to make
exactly.
the playoffs.
They've
This is what
all
we're
done
talking
something.
about.
Miami, don't lose 2 of your last 3. How about that to unranked teams? You ever
Have a defense
think that may
with a
hurt you?
pulse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to mean.
Like, yo, you're up 21-0 on Cuse. Finish it, and you're in. Like,
Yeah.
God.
Do you guys think that I guess there's. I was gonna say I guess it would be. Let's say Ole Miss did not lose to Florida. Ole Miss is sort of in Tennessee's spot because they were ranked ahead of them, a couple weeks ago. Do you think that Tennessee would be the fair contender out of that group where kind of they're talking about right there? Do you think they'd have a better resume than Miami and Alabama?
Yeah.
Well, they have 2 losses, so there would be no doubt. There would be no debate about it.
I guess. Yeah, I
the
guess
debate would be would be reversed. It would be Ole Miss and Tennessee fans arguing that the other team has a better resume, so they can fall.
I guess you're right. Then
spot.
they'd both be 10-2. That's right.
And have the easier path. Yeah,
that's a good call.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to go to Columbus or anything like that. So
face Oregon in the second game.
Right.
Yeah.
Another
Historic
day.
Oregon.
Another day for Tennessee basketball, playing a Power 4 opponent here in the early part of the season. The 4th time Tennessee has done so. And another beatdown in the SEC ACC Challenge. Tennessee manhandles Syracuse Orange in TBAAFCC 96-70. We'll let these two guys talk about the game a little bit. Came after the ranking show. So if you stuck around on ESPN, you obviously watched it. Ryan, what was your big takeaway from this game?
I think it was, Tennessee's offense continuing to look really good, and particularly in the first half when Tennessee did not shoot the ball well. I think they made 2 of 14 3-pointers in the first half, still scored 45 points, still scored over a point per possession in the first half. So I think to me that was what stood out, was particularly that we hadn't seen Tennessee's offense look that efficient when shots hadn't been falling. In the second half, shots fell, and they shot it really well. I can't remember the exact number, but maybe like 8 of 16 or 8 of 15, something like that in the second half. So that was a really good sign. And look, Tennessee's a lot better than Syracuse. Syracuse's best player, they were already a lot better before Syracuse's best player, J.J. Starling, was ruled out for the game. So I expected Tennessee to win handedly. But the way they did it was impressive. Cade Phillips was great. Again, just a lot to like about Tennessee early this season.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan there. There's a lot of things just I think from Tennessee's individual basis that there is to like, and Ryan mentioned a lot of them there. But I think that there's just so much sort of versatility on this team. Chaz Lanier is certainly proving himself to be a do-it-all scorer and a guy who, might start out cold, but he can get hot at times. He might start out hot, maybe he can get cold at times a little bit, but he is a shooter. He's going to be a guy who doesn't have a lot of fear when he steps back behind the three-point arc. I really like Igor Milicic's game. I talked about that last week on the podcast. Certainly, Cade Phillips is proving himself to be a very effective player off of the bench. But there's just a lot of things to like. There's the athleticism from Zakai Ziegler and what Felix Akpar brings down low a little bit, that you can have some of that game right there at the basket. I like the way that Tennessee is still continuing to play defense. They're forcing turnovers. They're scoring off those turnovers, or at least they did against Syracuse last night. So a lot of good things to like about this team. Certainly the rebounding, I think, is also one of them. And I think that's to Ryan's point. He really kind of hammered this home on the podcast last night. But that was a big reason why Tennessee was still able to get 45 points in the first half of yesterday's game without even, really using the three-point shot that much in the first 20 minutes. So a lot of things to like about this team. I think they've got a very high ceiling, but they've just done a great job of meshing together quickly. I mean, I remember in the first couple games, we talked about how it was a team that you could tell was still trying to figure each other out a little bit.
Yeah.
Seems like they've really been able to do a good job of that in just 8 games this season.
100%. It's, I feel like Tennessee struck gold in the transfer portal, and just how
no kidding
quickly a team's meshing with 3 starters that are transfers. I saw to get my guy Evan Maekawa had his rankings of the best 5-man lineups in college basketball, and Tennessee's starting 5 based solely off of what they've done to this point in the season were number 1. They were number 2 when you factor that in with projections the rest of the way behind A5 for Auburn. I don't know if it was starting 5 or not. So that's been really impressive. Chaz Lanier had a quiet 26 points, which is, I think the best thing you can say about his performance.
Yeah.
He, a guy that I've, been curious about or questioned how effective he'd be scoring when shots didn't go in. I think he had 11 points in the first half when he didn't make a three-pointer, found a way to score, heated up as he typically does in the second half, hit 4 threes then. So, that was really encouraging. I think Tennessee's not a super deep team right now, but I really like the minutes that Jordan Gainey and Cade Phillips are giving Tennessee off the bench this 6th and 7th.
Oh, I meant to say him
Tennessee,
as well.
Yeah. Cade Phillips was really good last night, as he has been for most of the season. And to me, it feels like Tennessee's got 7 guys, a 7-man rotation right now, with Darlin Stone-Dubar being that 8th guy. But those top 7 especially have been really good for Tennessee.
Yeah, and I meant to mention Gainey a second ago too. He had a point yesterday, I think, where he had 12 straight points. I think all by himself, maybe it was 10, 2 3-pointers, and 2 3-pointers, a jump shot, and then one at the basket as well. But I mean, that was 10 straight points just out of nowhere from Jordan Gainey after, I believe, scoring 0 in the first half of action. So he certainly is an exciting player off the bench. Now we'll see how he continues to kind of evolve in that role, but he was one of the guys I meant to mention a second ago too.
Same stat line for Gainey and Phillips. 12, 6, and 2.
Yep.
Cool.
I did notice that last night. That was kind of crazy.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So you mentioned, how Tennessee's not a very deep team, but they have a strong 7. You think that, Cam Carr will be back soon or eventually, right? So, do you think that this 7-man rotation can be, it's not going to give Tennessee any problems down the stretch when SEC play comes, if this is still what they're rolling with?
I don't think so. Because again, like I say, 7, D Stone's giving
Dubar's an 8th guy. Yeah.
8 to 10 minutes a game. Like I think you can get by with that. I'm really fascinated to see what Dubar and Cam Carr's minutes look like when they do get back, because they're kind of playing some, not the exact same, but somewhat similar roles, how that gets split. And they would both separately on their own be the 8th guy. You know what I mean? It's not like one's the 5th guy and one's the 8th guy, and they have similar roles. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. But yeah, I think they can get by. I think plenty of teams play rotations this small or this short when you get into the thick of the season.
Yeah.
Someone has to play, like Zakai's having to play 38 minutes in NCAA tournament games. I think, that can wear on you and be a little bit more of a problem. But just, roughly, or I guess in general, I don't think it's an issue.
Final thing here, dark mode jerseys debuted against the Orange. What were you guys' thoughts on it?
Oh, golly, I meant to mention that a minute ago. I loved them.
You did?
I think that they are great. And obviously, yes, they took the baseball jersey, they cut the sleeves off, and they threw the hat into the outfield, and they said, go play basketball.
Yeah.
That's all they did. If you're the Nike graphic designer, that was probably one of your easier jersey designs of the year. You just copied and pasted onto a basketball jersey. That being said, I think it was great. I don't think the basketball jersey should, to me, be too over the top with an orange collar or orange stripes or maybe throw back to those gray jerseys a little while ago, maybe like a gray power tee on the back by the nameplate. Those were horrible. So I think for the black jersey, I actually liked how simple they were. Just the block balls across the chest, a power tee at the left knee. I think that works really good. So I loved them. I think they looked good in the pictures, and I think they looked good on the court as well. I think they were a simple dark mode design, but I did like them.
I thought they were fine. I didn't have an issue with them or anything. Didn't love them, didn't hate them or anything. My thing is that I really like the 3 uniforms that Tennessee wears otherwise. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the scroll.
Solid compared to
Okay.
the other 3 is a little bit of a step back, and I don't like them as much as I like those, but I certainly don't dislike them or anything. They look pretty good. I'll be curious to see one just in general how much they wear them in, the ratio of wearing them in home games versus away games. We'll be curious because they are, after all, black uniforms. You typically think of wearing those on the road, not exclusively, but I'll be curious to see what that's like.
I believe it was last year where Tennessee did wear the cream jerseys in the playoffs. And then if you think back, you guys were there. So you had a up close and personal view of it. Tennessee baseball, I believe, won their championship in black uniforms, right? Could this be something where Tennessee even takes it all the way into March Madness if the players love it that much? I don't know. Obviously, I think that is very different from who Tennessee is, but the last national champion, right, at Tennessee were in those black jerseys when they won. So maybe some of those traditions are out the window.
Well, you can tell with the baseball team, Tony and the guys, they get a little superstitious with the jersey wearing.
Yeah.
When it's working,
is
you
that
don't
what it
change
was?
it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they wore it a lot in the clinching games. They wore it in the SEC tournament. They wore it in, I believe, Game 3 of the Super Regionals. Maybe they wore creams that game, but I think they wore the blacks that game, and they might have worn them in the regional too. And
they wore them against Clemson, for sure.
Yes, they did wear them against Clemson in that game. But to that point of the Clemson game, Tennessee baseball just refuses to wear their orange jerseys. Essentially, they've played now 11 games in Omaha under Tony Vitello. They've worn the orange jerseys one time, so they never wear the orange jerseys, which is kind of the opposite. Rick is a very, he got those gray uniforms out pretty quickly after his second year, I think. He's a more classic guy, but I know he likes the black uniforms. He had hinted about it on the Josh and Swain show over the summer after the College World Series because he was wearing that black jersey, and I thought it was a hilarious quote. He goes, I wear black every day. Which, if you see Rick Barnes, he has 2 outfits, and it's all black and it's all gray. Those are the only 2 outfits
he's got great style. Great. I like to be the same. Not a lot of color, black and gray.
Yeah. So all that to say, to your original question, Rick, I think that's possible for sure. If they like them, they'll roll with them in the postseason.
Yeah. Yep.
Before I completely wrap up, little note. Halftime over at TBAAFCC, Lady Vols absolutely wrecking Florida State, 45-27. Florida State 8-1. Wow. So obviously a good program. Has been solid. Tennessee 5-0 and a big lead at half over some tough competition over there down the road at TBAAFCC. All right, that'll wrap up this edition of the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. Be sure and follow Rocky Top Insider at Rocky Top Insider on all your social media platforms. You can also follow along with all your Tennessee athletics coverage needs on RockyTopInsider.com, whether that's signing day, football, playoffs, basketball, in season. So much going on right now as we laid out at the top of this thing. If you want to follow Rick Butler, you can do that at Rick Butler. You can also follow Ryan at rshump00. That's SCHUMP. And you can follow me at Jack Foster Media. Before Rick and Ryan, we'll see you on late night Sunday. We're going to do a little Selection Sunday pod. Probably we'll listen to it on Monday. So until next time, we'll see you.